well, that's a funny story. I two of my buddies are.
What's it? No, yeah, but tell the tale. By all means, I've got the microphone on there.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, hey. So you came. Everybody walked out because I was late. So, okay. So this is the thing with. Are you an Arsenal fan?
I'm a Liverpool fan.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Well, I have two buddies that are from here, from London. I met them in Florida about 10 years ago at the MegaCon. They came down, and we went out for a couple of pints, or about a couple of dozen pints, and they were telling me, I'm like, well, what's my football team gonna be? What's my team? So one was a Chelsea fan, and one was an Arsenal fan, and they're just telling me both different sides of Chelsea and Arsenal, and which way, which one's better and why and all that. And I'm like, well, I don't really know what it's going to be. So next thing you know, about 3 weeks later, this arrived in the mail. So I became, not this one, this is the 125th anniversary, but a red and white one back from the. So I'm like, so I'm an Arsenal fan.
So this is where you and Gail Ann Hurd get together, because she's the other famous Arsenal fan.
Oh, is she an Arsenal fan?
In creativity.
Oh.
The producer of Terminator is an Arsenal fan.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely blows my mind, does that. I think it's brilliant.
Are you an Arsenal fan?
I don't do football.
Oh, okay.
To explain, I'm a DJ by trade.
Oh.
We have other things to do on a Saturday afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
Which involved cider and girls.
Yep.
So yeah, we had other things to do, so it was a bit of a weird one. But welcome along to the MCM Comic stage. We are recording this as well, so we're going to spread this out to the wider world, and hopefully we'll be bringing more people in and saying hi to everyone as they come along, and also as we introduce everyone to Billy Tucci. Everybody, a round of applause. Quality, if not quantity.
No, I was a little late, and I saw about it.
No worries about it. My name is Leonard Sultana. Just a quick introduction. I run a website called Englishman In San Diego, which is all about comic conventions, and I get the chance to speak to these amazing creators.
And we're Facebook pals.
We are indeed. We share stories and things on occasion. What I've done in terms of research for this is obviously go back to the copies of SHI in my collection.
Okay.
And I've got a number of the books which I've read. But I've also gone to a number of sites and a couple of bits and pieces to try and find out about where she came from and also where you came from. Because the one thing the commonality with all the interviews are, I went to San Diego Comic Con, and next thing you know, I'm selling 3 million copies of the comic book. There's this big gap somewhere in the middle of all of that. So I think I want to just kind of talk about that. Certainly, if we talk about your start as a creator, I mean, when did you buy? Well, when did the bug really under your skin?
Well, I was, I grew up loving comics, and then I got out of it as what happens. High school comes around. I got into dirt bikes. I played hockey and girls. So you're same old story. And then when I was in college, and I went to Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, I was an illustration major, but I took fashion illustration because I grew up in the garment industry. My mother and father had a clothing manufacturing shop, and they would do things for Calvin Klein and stuff when a lot of that was made in America. And I kind of grew up in that whole environment and working in my mother's shop every day after school. I would, as soon as I'd come home, do my homework, get in the car and drive to her shop and underpress and clean and do everything like that. So and plus I'd rather draw beautiful women than guys that look like me. So that's why I went into fashion illustration as opposed to general. And I came up with the character SHI while at school. Now, because my one professor told me I should do comics. And there was the Pander Brothers, Christina Spar, Grendel story. And I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. And she's like, well, that style's a lot like yours. You can do this. So my best friend at college, and still my best friend, his name is John Tartaglione. His father is a well-known inker, Marvel art director. He wrote and illustrated the Pope comic, the Pope John Paul comic, and the Mother Teresa comic. And I think the Pope John Paul comic and the Mother Teresa comic, I think they sold something like 5 million copies. But the thing was, that book was published a year before Marvel started installing royalties. So just imagine what he would have made. But so I met with him. He was like my mentor. Called him Daddy-O, and tremendous draftsman, tremendous storyteller. And he said, you should do comics. And he said, I thought, well, so I'm looking at George Perez pages and John Byrne.
Yeah, I mean, you said you got into comics and then you kind of got out. What were the comics that you were reading?
Sergeant Rock. I love war comics. Were really my big thing. I love Captain America. I loved like it's Captain America, Sergeant Rock. That's how I went back from Marvel and DC. Always Batman. My favorite were like the weird war tales. You know, Our Army at War. Haunted Tank stories, on the unknown soldier books. I just really loved that. I also loved Werewolf of London. Werewolf by Night. Werewolf by Night. I love that book. I'd love to bring it back.
We had a panel which started off the day. It was about those kind of those newsstand comics. The ones that you kind of like got on the spinner racks.
Yes.
Was it? I'm not going to say pulp because you did have some incredible talent working on those books. But was it those that kind of drove you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then those were the days when comics were rolled up and put in your back pocket. You know, the great new comic mags came out, and you shared them with your friends and all, and it was just a great time riding your bicycle up to the Five and Dime store and getting them. And so getting back to them with the school. So I asked my friend John, how much money would you make? And again, I'm looking at George Perez pages and Byrne pages and Ditko pages, not Ditko, Steranko art, the stuff I really love. And he's like, they'd probably start you off at $25 a page. And I'm like, it'd take me a week to draw, a George Perez type page. So, so I got into that. I was in school, and then I'm like, I think I want to do this. And Frank Miller's Daredevil was my favorite. That was really my favorite.
I'm seeing a bit of a commonality with the stuff that you were kind of attracted to. Very much something that, while it was being sold to the kids, but had certainly a kind of a sense of steel to it. There was a bit of an adult sensibility to it. Were you an early reader, I'm guessing?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
So you kind of took it very much in early days.
And like things that like Guardians of the Galaxy, you never got it. Even the movie, and I guess I'm just prejudiced against it that, went to go see it, and I just felt it was loud. It was like Goonies in space, it seemed. And my friends who went there, they were mad at me because they're like, you didn't want to like it. You went in there not wanting to like it. I'm like, well, because I didn't like the comic. I mean, I got it. I got it, but it was, I like the Rocketeer. I love the Rocketeer. That's it. So get back, Miller's Daredevil, the Rocketeer, all the war comics, some Batman, and Werewolf by Night. I just love the horror stuff. I love, things like that. So flash forward, I said, I'm going to do this. So I had this character, SHI, I came up with, which was originally a male character. And I had samples. I sorted the first couple of pages, and I went to San Diego in 1993 as my portfolio. Got turned down by everybody. This is not a DC face. This is not the Marvel style. Because if you look at the old SHI books,
say, what was the reaction you got?
Yeah, it was a little more. I guess my character's a little more elongated, a little more fashiony looking, And then so I got on the plane home. Except for Brian Polito from Chaos Comics, Lady Death, said, "This is great. Would you do a pinup for me?" And that was the first work that was ever offered to me. So then I came back with some leads, like Malibu wanted me to do a cover and stuff like that. But I'm like, I'm going to do SHI. I'm going to do this book. And being, I guess it was my naivete. I didn't know anything about how to make a comic. So I'm like, I'm going to make a full color independent comic book. I had no idea what I was doing, and busted my ass doing that. We colored the pages, hand colored. We pasted the word balloons down with, like they were printed out on my friend's Mac computer. I don't know, it was an Apple II or something like that. And I just did it by, I guess, just my love for it. But the funny thing happened is that my enthusiasm was so contagious. I ended up getting Fred Pierce. I met Fred Pierce, who was running Valiant at the time, one of the higher-ups at Valiant. And he was using the same people that did the separations for the book. And he said, you know what, I'll get this book published, printed for you. So he made a call to Sparta Printing, because I had no money. And they said, this book is going to sell. Do it. So we had initial orders of 37,000 copies for SHI #1. I came about saying I was this new company. My wife at the time was the marketing director. She wasn't my wife at the time.
You definitely had a sense of ambition.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify that, you kind of marketed yourself
Yeah.
as like this big company.
Yeah.
And you were, it was.
I was doing it in my one.
Was it a one-bedroom apartment?
Yeah, one-bedroom apartment in Queens. I was 6 months behind in my rent, just because I was just throwing everything into this book. But Mr. Chang, my landlord, you know, he was just great. He's like, yeah, I believe you. He's like, your book is going to do well. And the greatest thing was I had gotten so much resistance because people like girl books don't sell. You know, Wonder Woman, there's not even a Wonder Woman title because there wasn't a Wonder Woman title. And I'm like, this is going to change things. Something's going to happen with this. They just want good stories. It doesn't matter if it's a male protagonist or a female protagonist. I think if you have a good story and something new and something different, it's going to do well. And, you know, that book hit the stands. Within 3 weeks, we had reorders for over 140,000 copies. It just exploded, and it was wonderful. It was just amazing. And I only printed 50,000.
How did you get the word out? Because
it's word of mouth.
That's a big number to sell.
Yeah.
Of a comic which.
I called Diamond up, and Heroes World was another distributor, in Capital City, and I got interviews in them. I bought a full-page ad. Now, here's the funny thing too, is that I met these companies. They were Kiwis. They're from New Zealand, and these guys said that they'll partner with me. They'll be the publisher. I'll be the creator, and we'll own the character 50-50. They'll do all this stuff. Anyway, it came time to me doing all this work that I'm getting the ads, I'm putting together the ads for Diamond, I'm organizing interviews, all this stuff. It came time to pay Diamond and Capital City and Heroes World the things. I owe them $4,500. That's what I owed in advertising. And I remember the one guy said, Billy, I can't do a New Zealand accent, but it's like, there's no way I'm going to pay $4,500 to advertise a comic book. And then, so I'm like, well, that's it, I'll leave. So I left, because I was basically a glorified receptionist for them. I was doing my work, but answering their phones for them. You know, typical, try to take advantage of a young creator. And, but my wife's aunt worked for one of the biggest lawyers in New York City. And so when I left, they wanted to own outright the 50% of the character. We went to them, hit them up with no. They'll get 20% of the profits for the first 3 issues. And if you see SHI #1, it says Empire Publications on it, and then Crusade, my new company. And because they were Empire Publications, that was their brand. And I was able to, and it says produced by the Manhattan Company in New York in the first 3 issues. That's what it has to say. And after that, I mean, we end up selling in the first year 1.5 million comics, I think, first 2 years.
How many issues were that?
I think about how many issues, maybe 6, 7 issues, that's it. Yeah. You know, I was doing, in the first year, I was doing it, the book was bi-monthly. But what I did was when SHI #1 was, I didn't advertise SHI #2 until 3 months later, after SHI #1. So SHI #1 was a March book. It came to July to get SHI #2, because I knew when that book hit the stands, it was going to sell out, and then the retailers would then look into the previews comic, the catalog, and say, oh, there's #2. So my orders for #1 were 37,000 initially. The orders for #2 initially were 80,000. And I only printed 80,000 copies. So there was only 50,000 #1, 80,000 in #2, and it just kept growing. But I just printed to order. I didn't print thousands of reorders or anything like that, you know, and that's what kept this demand for this comic. And but it was a good story, apparently. I mean, you know, Chris Claremont did for the first trade paperback we did, he did the introduction, you know, and he's like, you did this? And I'm like, yeah. And he loved it. And he's been a mentor to me and a great friend. He's at our wedding, just a great family friend, and just someone who took me under his wing. I've been very lucky like that. Like, Stanley loves me. Stan loves my wife met Joan, Stan's wife. This is how different Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con was in '94. They were both online getting lunch. It was Joan Lee getting lunch online with my wife, and they just started talking, and we owned a Doberman, they had Dobermans at the time, and the next thing you know, my wife comes back from lunch, she was like, oh, I want to introduce you to 2 friends of mine, and there's Joan and Stan Lee. And I'm like, well, what? And it's like, oh, hi, it's like, I love your wife, and you know, and my wife doesn't know anything about comics, you know, and that's how I became friends with Stan, and then he's always been you know, just a real driving force, you know, to help me. Same thing with Joe Kubert. really took me, and Joe was always a doll to me. Frank Frazetta loved me. You know, I just ended up meeting these people, and I think what helped me was that also after I did SHI, we did about 100 issues for 10 years, and I just got burnt out. But then because I became friends with so many DC editors and Marvel guys and stuff like that, like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, oh, I'd love to do Sergeant Rock. Oh, I want to do Heroes for Hire. Oh, I want to work, and became friends with Jimmy. And I think what helped me was because I was independent and I did my own thing. I never needed anything from anybody. So we generally became friends, all of us.
It sounds like that you had your head screwed on when it came to the business, but at the end of the day, you've got to put the book together.
I got to put the book together.
You've got to put the book together. What was that initial run, or that first idea stretch?
It was 13 issues.
13 issues.
13
That's
issues.
quite long for that period of time.
And because it was a very intertwined book, and then we had the Tomo series that came out in between that, and Manda drew, and Jimmy inked. And that we started introducing more characters, and it just got real big. And then what happened was she was by the 60th, 70th issue. We kept doing little mini-series and stuff like that. I had other writers writing it and all, and the character got lost. It wasn't what I wanted.
Well, tell you what then, just in case there is somebody in the room or somebody watching this that isn't familiar with SHI, give us the elevator pitch.
Yeah, my book SHI, it's got a female protagonist, and it's basically a modern-day samurai story. My character, Anna Ishikawa, is in a long line of descendants of the Shadow War that's existed between the samurai, the Sohai warriors, which were the warrior monks, and then the Yakuza are in it as well. And this war really is deeply involved in politics, the arts, business, all of that, but people die. You know what I mean? It's like a mob type of thing. It's and she's just a soldier in this war. She's drafted into this war, but on the other point, her mother though is Christian, so she's really torn between the thing. And I actually made her biracial. That her mother is white and her father's Japanese, and I'll tell you the only reason why was so I can give her green eyes, so I can add some more color to it. I'm like, wow, I'm doing color. Well, let's make her eyes green, because that's another color I can add to the book, and that's why she has green eyes, and that's why she's biracial. Was mostly because of but it kind of fit into the story. It fit in well.
Where did that Asian? I mean, you must have had an interest, obviously, in the Asian culture.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
That came from. Well, I think Akira Kurosawa is Akira Kurosawa and Norman Rockwell are the greatest storytellers of the 20th century in my mind. And I love Kurosawa films. I love samurai films, but I really didn't get into Japanese culture until I got into woodblock art. I was in one of my courses in college was about art history, and then we would do things and create projects on it. And I just saw this woodblock work of the great, Hokusai's Great Wave off of Kanakawa or Kanakawaga. I don't remember right now. Sorry, I think it's Kanakawana. And it just struck me. And what struck me too was the lack of shadows, and everything is all line art. And it really influenced me a lot, because you got to draw better then. You can't hide things in this. And I love noir. I love people, I love guys that can draw like that. Mike Mignola, I love Darwin Cook, what Darwin would do with the light and the dark, the chiaroscuro that they would call it. I love that. But I'm like, well, let me do something different. Let me see if I can do with less blacks. If I can do mostly with line art and stuff. And also I liked, Patrick Nagel from the 80s. I'm like, wow, this is something really striking about this, and the blacks are real black, but then the face is just you have to draw it. You can't hide it in shadows. When you have, of course, when the story tells it, you should. Someone's in the shadows, but for the most part, if they're just out talking like this, And another thing I switched to was everyone was inking, and I went to the Barrow Prismacolor pencils, and I did it that's black, and I ordered like 1,000 or 2,000 black pencils. And when you draw, and if you come by my tables right there, you'll see that I don't have, like, some things are inked and some things aren't, because when I draw with the black pencil and it gets colored from that, it adds a really nice watercolor sense to it. Like Sergeant Rock and the Lost Battalion, there's no inks on that book. That was all done, with pencil. Well,
all of that comes from your illustration background and learning and teaching yourself your own artistic style. And what you're describing there in the way that you put SHI together is from an artist's perspective.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you do have to write the thing
Yes.
in terms of an authentic Asian voice.
Yeah.
How much research did you do?
Oh, yeah,
and where did that come from?
Well,
who did you call on?
The Japan Society in New York City. And my one friend Audrey Oiki, who the Oiki Gallery is named after, and Anna Ishikawa was one of my professors at college. And I just picked their brains, you know what I mean? And just would go to lunch with them.
How long did that take? From concept to...
Yeah, well, I developed the character around 1990. So, Anna Ishikawa was my professor, and Audrey was one of my best friends, and I would just because the Japanese society is so polite, and they turn, making tea into an art form. But they're the most violent society the world's ever known. You know what I mean? A lot of misogyny and stuff, and I just found it great that a female could rise above that. You know what I mean? This woman warrior. Back then, when it wasn't cool to have that. This is before. And then when the book hit, I think what also helped obviously was that Brian Pulido's Lady Death came out. The Vampirella came out a week. The resurgence of her came out a week later, and I think it just caught everybody off guard. And the art was good, I guess, I hope, and people just collected them up, and then that started that whole bad girls craze, and then there was like so many, real misogynistic, a lot of crap that followed and all. But
what was the response from those that did turn it down? When you then went back to these conventions, what was the response?
Well, one of the funny things is I had an editor who worked for Marvel. And he embarrassed me at the New York Comic Con. San Diego Comic Con when I was showing the art. He's like, "Oh, look at this, another friggin' warehouse scene. Who knows? Draw in a warehouse. That's what they tell you to do. Draw in a warehouse. People fighting in a warehouse. It's real Silver Age, He's like, if I see another, he's like, get this out of here. Like literally, like just dismiss me. He's like, if I see another warehouse scene, I'm gonna kill myself. Hey, Johnny, look. He showed it to another editor. Another warehouse scene. Next, like that type of thing, real rude. Well, that was San Diego '93. In San Diego 1996, he called me the week after asking for a job because he had gotten fired. I was laid off from Marvel. I didn't have the position for him. I don't hold grudges, and I never told him that story. And I'm not going to say who it is, but he was a real a-hole.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and then some of the other publishers. There was Defiant was one, turned it down. Another one was Triumphant, another small publisher. They went out of business too, and it was nice. It was kind of laughed my way to the bank.
I think what I was also leading on to is because we've just had a panel which really touched on the art of collaboration and the reaction and getting feedback back from your peers. Like you say, Chris Claremont was a big fan of the book from early doors. Obviously, when you're putting a book to paper, you have to have that kind of feedback. Were you getting that from the fans, or were you getting it from your peers? Where were you kind of then drawing the story towards?
Oh, it was always the fans, because the fans, then I became, some of my best friends are fans, and what I've learned is that there were so many fans that were into Japanese culture. You know what I mean? They love samurai, and they like swordsmanship, and they love, the art of war, and they love those things, and I fed off of them because well, what about this? I get ideas from them, and it was great because we became like a family. You know what I mean? That it was this little book that could, and of course people bought it because people thought it was going to be worth a lot of money. So it was kind of right after the big speculation boom, but it was amazing. It was amazing to know these people, even fans, and I'm lucky to be here. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I have nothing to worry about. I have a great life. I get to do this for a living. Come here to London, and have people thank me after they buy my book for me to sign it. They thank me, which is crazy. But there's a lot of people that were kids that I met 25 years ago that are now editors and stuff, and they came to me like, "You were so nice to me." I'm like, well, people like you changed my life, of course. Because you can get, some people can be a little haughty, and to say, to use a word, and but I was always appreciative of it. But the fans really, and then of course the peers. If you have, Frank Frazetta does a cover for you.
Sure.
You know what I mean? We'll get Frank Frazetta to do a cover for them, and then even like with Sergeant Rock, that Joe Kubert, that when I brought Sergeant Rock back, I could never be Joe Kubert, so why try? So I had to do something different, and because we worked on a real battle that actually took place this week. In 1944, with the real veterans, with the surviving veterans, that it was almost like excuse me, a documentary. We made it like almost like a documentary. So we used all real names and stuff. And Joe was just my biggest supporter throughout the whole thing.
So when you were putting that, and you talked about, because you kind of looked over it a little bit there, about the burning out, and so you did put out all those books, because you were doing all the business side end of it, and you were also putting out the book.
Yes.
But obviously you've got the fan demand as well. How difficult was it to actually walk away from that first run?
It wasn't. After like I said, about 100 issues we did, I was burnt out, and I needed to take a break from it, because again, the character kind of got away from what I wanted, and I just needed a good story. I needed another story, and to be excited about the story, because I would tell people the original story and they'd be riveted, you know? And I think because I was enthusiastic. And now we're doing that with the new one. The new one is called Return of the Warrior, but it's going to be the comic itself is 25 years past the original storyline. So
it goes on the actual timeline of the original.
The actual timeline, and the thing is that Anna will now be in her mid-40s. She has a teenage daughter. She married Pete, the police officer, who became like a vigilante, but he's in jail because she could let it go and he never could. So her warrior days are far behind her, and now something happens and it all comes back. But all the original characters are in it and all. And I'll tell you. She's now the curator for the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, which the Brooklyn Botanic Garden has the largest collection of cherry trees in the United States that are just for display and real done, not farms at all. And it's in the middle of Brooklyn, and it's this oasis of peace, and it's all Japanese-inspired gardens and all. And now she's the curator of that. And one day, a doctor shows up, a man, and he says, "I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I've treated Masahiro Arashi, who was her antagonist in the book, for the past 25 years. So at the end of the Way of the Warrior storyline, she goes up against this modern-day samurai, and he realizes that it's all his fault. Like, he created her to do, this is why she's doing it. And at the end, he ends up giving her a second chance at life, to forego the killing and things like that. And he does it and dishonors himself. He actually breaks his own sword and takes responsibility for all of her crimes, and giving her a second chance, because she fights him and he beats her, and he sees just what cherry blossoms fall. I wrote it a long time ago, but now he's suffering from dementia, and the doctor shows up and says, Masahiro Arashi, he's dying from dementia, and but he's escaped he's in a mental institution in New York, and he's like, but he's coming for you. I've treated him for 25 years that he's had that, he's back to where he was then. And he just wants vengeance on you and your daughter. And it's a story about Anna and this doctor trying to solve and try to catch Arashi before he can get to her daughter, type of thing. And there are killings going on, and it's a real thriller,
What do you see as the...
Hey, Jeff!
What do you see as the difference between the way and approach that you're doing the book now, the new SHI book, and the way that you did it back in the day? Have you seen an evolution in your own style, your own? How would you say it's changed?
Yeah, I think I'm a far better draftsman. I think far better storyteller, and again, I needed that new passion, because I had so much passion when the book first came out. I was so enthusiastic. I had such passion for this character and this storyline, and then you kind of, again, you become a businessman. You just lose it. I've regained that with the new story, and I just, that's all I keep thinking about, and that's what I want to do. I don't want to do another.
I'm guessing the projects that you did post that first volume as well. I mean, Sergeant Rock, obviously. Yeah. Is a title that everyone is familiar with, and you did that. What was the other books that you did?
I did Sergeant Rock, I did Heroes for Hire, I did, let me try to think, Marvel Civil War, did some stuff with that.
What did you learn from those projects? Because, I mean, those are obviously projects for company owned, so there's some definite rules of engagement when it comes to working with those properties. What did you take away from those, and did you apply them to this new version?
Oh, yeah. Well, the things that, DC Comics are just great. Everyone there is so nice. They're just real accommodating. But I did learn something, is that working for Marvel and DC can break your heart. Because you love these characters so much, you come up with these great pitches, and for one reason or another, oh, this character's going to die, or this is on the schedule for that, we can't do it. They'll pass on it, even though they're good. So I came up with an idea next year, well, probably not 2019, because that's the SHI's 25th anniversary, so we'll be doing a lot of SHI comics. But in 2020, I want to do a book called Rejected, a Kickstarter, and it's the greatest comic stories you thought you'd never read. Because I have so many friends that had the same stories that will tell you their pitches, and like, oh my God, why would they do that? Like, I don't know, they just, for one reason, schedule-wise, or that's not in the plans, or they have other plans for these characters, and they'll pass on it. So I'm like, well, why don't you just create your own character and use that same story? So I have a couple of Batman stories that I pitched that got passed up. And my son Matthew created a character called Nightflyer, my 12-year-old, when he was like 5. I'm like, let's make these Nightflyer stories. So then we can create our own characters with these own stories, and the logo will be Rejected, a big stamp, like a BAM right on the cover, and you'll know who the characters are, but they'll be our own characters. But then learning, what I've also learned is about deadlines through them, because they're real tough on their deadlines. So it speeded me up a lot. That I'm like, okay, it's got to get done. I got to write a script a week. I'm bringing back Miss Fury now for Dynamite. And I got to do a script a week. That's it. Take 5 days to do a script. And I do full scripts, but I also really work my treatments. I'll do a treatment for the issue, or I'll do 6 treatments, and I'll take me 2 weeks or so to do that. But then when you get to
so it really streamlined your process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of cool too that like a lot of comics now are 20 pages. And if you only had those 2 extra pages, what you could do, but it helps you edit yourself too. And I love those Kirby and Stan Lee stories. I mean, the great, what's the one, Fantastic Four, is it 126 or something with This Man, This Monster? The one with Ben Grimm. I mean, what some of these guys today would do would take them 12 issues to tell that story. It was one 24-page story. And it was amazing. So now with the SHI comic, the Return of the Warrior graphic novel that will launch in January via Kickstarter is 48 pages. So I have to tell that story in 48 pages.
Well, that was going to be my next question as well, because you put the first original version and you plowed all your money into it, and you made that investment, and you kind of wrote in as many things as you could to get that first book done. But now you're going to Kickstarter with this new volume.
Yes.
Do you feel that is the way that independent comics should be done in 2018, because it gives you that control?
Absolutely, because the thing is, it's just the way the industry is now, that if you order from your previews catalog through Diamond, they have, DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, the premier publishers. By the time, like when I was publishing SHI, before the whole Diamond thing happened, we were, say, on page 25 in the previous catalog. Crusade was my company, Crusade. Now Crusade Comics, and we'll go through Diamond again, but now it's going to be at page like 300. So a lot of retailers, by the time they get to the back, to the best of the rest that they call it or whatever, they've spent their allowance. They spent their monthly allowance with the books. And a lot of people don't even know some of these great books out there. So I think if you do a crowdfunding thing, it gives that family atmosphere again. It gives the people a part of something. Like, hey, we can do this. And Jimmy Palmiotti's been a big help to me, and Brian Polito with his Lady Death books he's just killing it. But he has the books done and he gets them out. Like our first Kickstarter is a book called Zombie Sama, which is a book I created with my friend John Brolia, and the book's done. So, and that's to cut our teeth, my Kickstarter teeth, because I've never done a comic Kickstarter, and that's in a few weeks. So as long as we get it funded, that's the important thing. She's got to be a big Kickstarter. She's got to get funded. It's got to be big. So
I think the follow-up question to about Kickstarter then. At the end of the day, SHI was a massive hit. It sold really well. Could it have gone to a publisher? Could it have gone to an Image? Could it have gone to whoever, an independent that really could have taken some of that load off you to kind of, you just produce the book? I mean, was that an option? Oh,
there was. Yeah, I'd spoken to Marcus Silvestri, why don't you come over to us, to Image? But with Image, I was still kind of doing everything. You still put together the whole book, So I was like, we'll keep it small, keep it me. you know, but then I was publishing 4 books a month.
You also reap all the rewards as well. Which,
Yes,
as well.
Yep, and that's the same thing with the Kickstarter. You do it all yourself. You get everything yourself. Indiegogo. I mean, Ethan Van Sciver, who's from doing the Flash Rebirth, Green Lantern, all that. He no longer works with DC, and then crowdfunded his Cyberfrog book. He did an Indiegogo and sold $640,000. He wanted $15,000 for the book. So crazy, you know. But you then you give the rewards. People get certain things they can only get through Kickstarter. So maybe there's only 1,000 of this comic, as opposed to there being 50,000 comics out there. And it's kind of cool, people, and they want to help you. You know, I think that I've hoped I let people know how appreciative I have been to them, to have changed my life, and so I hope that they'll want to do with the book and see the comic again.
Well, okay. Well, let's very quickly talk about SHI, Volume 2.
Yes.
And certainly the way that the character has evolved, because I mean certainly the way that the landscape of culture has changed since that original book, and now in 2018. The way that people approach the sense of diversity, when it comes to sense of feminism as well. How's that affected this new volume?
Well, there'll be fun. Yeah, well, there'll be fun things because Anna, like in her mid-40s, I will have some fun things where she takes out the old costume. And if you guys want to see the costume, well, Wonder Woman, she shows less skin than Wonder Woman does. But there's a part of her putting on her leggings and she's like, how the hell did I ever fit in these? What am I kidding me? You know, because she's, a grown woman now. And, my wife, we've been together 30 years and she's never looked more beautiful to me. So why not have a mature character? Why not have a beautiful, I mean, we hung out with Kelly Hu in Hawaii in August, and Kelly Hu is, I think, 51. She's beautiful. She's stunning. So, they don't have to be all these little waifs, running around in schoolgirl costumes and all. Why not have a comic book grow up? And then she's got her punk snot-nosed little teenage daughter, so we'll have fun with that. But, talk about the diversity thing is that we did have a character that was biracial. She was a Japanese lead. Her best friend Tomoe is a lesbian, and we've had that all back in the day, back in the book. So, but then again, I'm also from New York, so never bother. Who cares? We're all live and let live. As long as you don't, bother me, you can do whatever you want, type of thing.
How about the actual culture within the book? Not just necessarily the characters then. I mean, where is it an Asian background? What's the background to the actual story?
Well, okay, so Anna, again, like I said, she's biracial.
Is it more Western in terms of the actual background?
Well, what we're gonna have fun with this because her daughter is the main. It's really, it's Anna's book, but we're really bringing her daughter Hotaru, which means firefly in Japanese. She's being brought to the forefront. So she's going to learn, like the audience might, about this culture that her mother's past and her mother's this society, this shadow war that she belonged to of honor killings and things like that. And she's a kid living in Brooklyn, a 16-year-old kid. And so she's going to learn. So I think she'll be like the window for the audience to see, like, wow, they do that? They did that in Japan? The Yakuza does that in Japan? I mean, it's some brutal stuff going on. So it'll be culture shock for her as she has to learn, but she has to learn to survive to do this. So she's going to have to learn about that society. Her mother's going to have to train her, but then she has her grandfather who always did train her in a way, but with different things, with to paint. And when he was teaching her to paint with these big brushes, there's a style of Japanese calligraphy that's done with these huge brushes. And her grandfather is a master at that, and I have him teaching his he's getting old and all, but he's teaching her that way of that art, but he's really teaching her the art of war. You know what I mean? Because they use a naginata, which is like a spear-like weapon with, type of thing, and she'll know this inherently. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
When it comes to the influence that she has had, and also in the way that it's reflected in this new volume, because there have been books that have come out since that first original run of SHI, which have taken the themes that you developed and run with them. I mean, Kabuki is certainly a book that springs to mind.
Yeah, well, Kabuki's that's my buddy David, but Kabuki came out the same time she did. I mean, Kabuki debuted in the Razor SHI special, but he developed that all on his own, and that's a great book. If you guys want to read something, she wears the mask. But he's really into history himself. He knows it's a fantastic comic. But there have been, you know, rip-off books though. There were some other ones. I mean, this weird name. One was called Harry Carey. You know, I guess like, you know, another was. But then again, in Kill Bill, you know, someone told me that Tarantino had a SHI statue. Like he was a comics fan and had a SHI statue in his office. And then you see the scene of Kill Bill with the Oran Ishii character. A lot of that's like the SHI story. You know, I'm like, oh man.
You could definitely see the way that SHI painted itself into culture and into other artworks. I think the other mirroring with Kabuki as well is the way that David Mack effectively learnt storytelling over the course of the process of the making of that book, and you did that with SHI as well.
Yeah.
I think that's
it's
something that there's a definite sisterhood between the two.
And when we did a book called Senryaku, which was the 36 stratagems of the Chinese art of war. And one was, it was to like ally yourself with somebody. And it was all the top artists. That's when Frazetta did the cover too. I had Jim Lee, you know, Joe Quesada, Jimmy Palmiotti. Oh my God, everybody. I had the top guys gals doing pages. But David, I gave him the one where it's to be with an ally, and I asked him, would you put Kabuki in it? So Kabuki's the only other character aside from mine that's in the Senryaku, because I just loved his storytelling. I just love his passion he has for the art. He loves comics. He loves storytelling. He loves painting. So you know, he's just a great guy. So
I think we've got time for maybe one question before we do have to wrap things up, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Billy? Oh, look at this straight away. Excellent stuff.
Do you have a question?
Nice and loud. Your name and your question, please.
Okay, my name is Anna.
Anna!
Yes. Those who love for war comics.
Yeah, hang on.
Does your love for war? Okay, oh look at this, here we go.
Okay.
Was that short?
Yeah, you can use this one, go for it.
Does your love for war comics lead you to create Victoria Cross, and are we going to have more
How
of
do you
that?
know? You know about Victoria
I
Cross?
love her.
Oh, so do I. Oh yeah, I have this character I created, Victoria Cross, and yeah, she'll be out on 2020. We'll have Victoria Cross out. I created it that it takes place in the 1930s. During the Spanish Civil War. That's how I originally created Victoria Cross. Now I've been told that people, like I was approached someone like I should do this as a steampunk idea. And I could do it the same, but
shaking your head
no? So
there.
you say no?
No, I like the World War II.
Okay, good, because so do I. So do I, and that story, that's a great story. It takes place during the Spanish Civil War, and all the armies of you know, the fascist armies are allying themselves with Franco. Then you have the Russians coming and allying themselves with the Republic. She is sent down there as a writer for a fascist British newspaper, but her whole intent is to steal their fighter plane, the Heinkel 112, which is the fighter plane that was developed the same time the Messerschmitt was, the 109, if you know that. It was a better plane. But due to politics and stuff, they gave Heinkel, he said, you build bombers. Let Messerschmitt build the fighters. But her whole guise is to go there and steal that plane. Because at that time, this is before the Spitfire came out, the Hurricane was still behind in the technology. And in the Spanish Civil War, the British were flying, you know, biplanes, Glossary Gladiators and all. And that's the whole story, is her how to do it. But when she does it, she finds out that the fascists have, sorry.
Bear with us.
Yeah. Sorry. It's my ringtone. Anyway, that she uncovers a plot for the fascists to invade Gibraltar. And so the plan for Victoria is to steal this plane, land it on Gibraltar, where the entire British Mediterranean and North Atlantic fleets will be moored as a show of force during the war, which they did. They brought the fleets down. And but the Germans come up with, we could bomb these. They're sitting ducks. It'll be at Pearl Harbor before Pearl Harbor, and she has to stop that. And she uses the Heinkel and stuff to do. It's a really cool story.
I really should have asked you that question way before then, because I think we could have just launched into a lot more talking about that story.
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah, that I love that story.
Fantastic. So unfortunately, ladies and gents, we have come run out of time. We do have panels to continue. We do have to, unfortunately, wrap things up and send you on your way. So if you do want to ask some more questions, by all means, head to Billy's table.
Sir? Jerry Tucci's banned from the UK, but he will show up.
He's out of here. Jerry's fan club is now left.
Hey guys, thanks for saying. I know people left because I was late. Sorry.
It's been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause, please? Billy Tucci, everybody. Thank you.
My table is right there. If you have any questions, I have prints, I have comics, and I just love to talk.